A rescue puppy seems perfectly normal until his new family notices he does things no ordinary dog should be able to do. He responds to conversations he shouldn't understand, comforts family members before they even realize they need comfort, and shows an awareness that suggests he possesses knowledge from beyond this world. When the veterinarian discovers the impossible truth about what this puppy really is, it opens a window into a spiritual dimension where the souls of beloved animals continue to watch over, protect, and love the humans they're meant to guide. This isn't just about one special dog. It's about understanding that some animals are messengers, bridges between worlds, sent to teach us that love creates connections that death cannot break. If you believe that every dog has a soul that lives forever, that some animals are sent to us as spiritual messengers from the place where all beloved pets wait for their humans, then you're already part of our pack. Subscribe to Echoes of Dog, where we share stories that prove the spiritual connection between humans and dogs runs deeper than science can explain. Hit that like button if this story touches your heart, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Let me tell you about the day a family thought they were saving a puppy, but discovered the puppy had actually been sent to save them. My name is Dr. Rachel Morrison, and I've been a veterinarian for 18 years. I thought I understood animals, their behavior, their needs, their limitations. But 3 months ago, a small golden retriever mix named Scout walked into my clinic and shattered everything I believed about the boundaries between this world and whatever exists beyond it. You see, I know what it's like to lose someone without warning. When I was 12, my little brother Danny died in his sleep from an undiagnosed heart condition. No symptoms, no warning signs, just gone. One morning, I went to wake him up for school, and he was already with the angels. That loss shaped everything about me. My need to save lives, my fear of missing warning signs, my desperate desire to prevent other families from experiencing the sudden devastation that nearly destroyed mine. That's why I became a vet, because animals show you when something's wrong. They can't hide their pain the way humans do. With animals you can see illness coming, fight it, win against it. I needed that sense of control after losing Danny so suddenly, so senselessly. But what I discovered with Scout would teach me that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from preventing loss, but from understanding that love creates connections that death cannot touch. Scout belonged to the Reeves family. Michael, a construction foreman trying to rebuild his life after his wife's death 2 years ago, and his 9-year-old daughter Emma, who hadn't spoken more than a few words since losing her mother. They'd adopted Scout from the county shelter 3 weeks earlier, hoping a puppy might help them heal from grief that had left them both isolated in their own sorrow. Dr. Morrison, Michael said as he carried Scout into my examination room, "There's something different about this dog, something I can't explain." I looked at Scout, a beautiful 6-month-old golden retriever mix with intelligent amber eyes and a coat that seemed to shimmer in the clinic's fluorescent lights. He appeared perfectly healthy, alert, well socialized. Nothing unusual about him at first glance. "What kind of behaviors are you seeing?" I asked, beginning my standard examination. Michael glanced at Emma, who sat quietly in the corner chair, her small hands folded in her lap. He knows things. Yesterday, Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, and she started getting frustrated with a math problem. Before she even showed any outward signs of being upset, Scout got up from across the room, walked over, and put his head in her lap. Just like that. Like he could sense her emotional state before she even expressed it. That got my attention. Advanced emotional awareness in dogs wasn't unheard of, but the timing Michael described suggested something beyond normal canine intuition. "And that's not all," Michael continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Last Tuesday, I was in the garage working on some project plans. I wasn't thinking about Linda, my wife, but suddenly I felt this wave of sadness hit me. Before I could even process what I was feeling, Scout appeared beside me. He'd somehow gotten out of the house, found me in the garage, and started doing this thing where he presses his whole body against my legs. The exact same way Linda used to hug me when she could tell I was upset. I felt a chill run down my spine. How exactly did Scout get out of the house? That's just it. All the doors were still locked. The dog door was latched shut. I have no idea how he got outside. As I continued my examination, Scout remained perfectly calm, but I noticed something unusual. His eyes never left mine, and there was an intelligence in his gaze that seemed almost human in its depth. More than that, there was a quality of recognition, as if he was studying me with the same professional assessment I was giving him. "Emma?" I said gently, trying to draw the little girl into conversation. "What do you think about Scout?" Emma looked up, her dark eyes holding the careful guardedness of a child who'd learned that the people you love can disappear without warning. She glanced at Scout, then back at me, and spoke in a voice so soft I had to strain to hear her. "He talks to me." Michael's face flushed with embarrassment. "Emma, sweetheart, we've talked about this. Dogs don't actually talk." But I held up a hand to stop him. "Emma, can you tell me what Scout says to you?" The little girl's eyes grew bright, more animated than I'd seen her since they'd arrived. "He doesn't use words like people do, but he tells me things. He told me that Mommy is okay, that she's not hurting anymore. He told me that she sends him messages for us." Michael's jaw tightened with the frustration of a parent trying to balance his child's emotional needs with what he believed to be reality. "Dr. Morrison, Emma's been through a lot. Sometimes children create elaborate fantasies to cope with loss. But as I looked at Scout, something extraordinary happened. The puppy tilted his head and looked directly at the empty space beside Emma's chair. His tail began wagging, not with the random enthusiasm of a young dog, but with the specific focused excitement of an animal greeting someone familiar. Then Scout did something that made my breath catch in my throat. He walked to that empty space and sat down, positioning himself as if he were between Emma and another person. His head moved back and forth, as if he were watching a conversation between the little girl and someone I couldn't see. "Emma?" I asked carefully. "Is someone else here with us right now?" Emma nodded, her face lighting up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "Mommy's here. She comes to visit sometimes, and Scout always knows when she's coming before I do." The temperature in the examination room suddenly dropped at least 10 degrees. Scout's behavior became even more focused, his attention completely fixed on the space where Emma claimed her mother was standing. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so faint I thought I might be imagining it. "Take care of them, Dr. Morrison. They need to understand that love doesn't end." I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but the room contained only Michael, Emma, Scout, and me. Michael was checking his phone, oblivious to anything unusual. Emma was smiling at the empty space beside her chair, and Scout was looking directly at me with an expression that seemed to say, "Now you're beginning to understand." "Dr. Morrison," Michael asked, noticing my reaction. "Is everything okay?" I struggled to regain my professional composure, but my hands were trembling as I completed Scout's examination. Every test I ran came back perfect: temperature, heart rate, reflexes, muscle tone. By every medical standard, Scout was a completely normal, healthy puppy. Except for the way he kept looking at places where no one was standing. Except for the way the air around him seemed charged with an energy I'd never encountered before. Except for the way he seemed to understand human conversation at a level that transcended normal animal cognition. "Mr. Reeves," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'd like to schedule a follow-up appointment for Scout in 2 weeks. I want to monitor his development more closely." What I didn't tell him was that I wanted to understand what I'd just witnessed, because in 18 years of veterinary practice, I'd never encountered an animal who seemed to serve as a bridge between the living and the dead. As the Reeves family prepared to leave, Scout did something that confirmed my growing suspicion that this was no ordinary puppy. He walked directly to me, sat down, and placed his paw on my hand. The moment our skin made contact, I felt a warmth that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical world. And I heard that whisper again, clearer this time. "Some of us are sent back, Dr. Morrison. Some of us return to help the ones we love heal from grief. Scout isn't just a puppy, he's a messenger." I looked down at Scout, whose amber eyes held a wisdom that seemed far older than his 6 months of life. In that moment, I understood that my encounter with this extraordinary animal would challenge everything I thought I knew about the boundaries between life and death, about the connections that bind souls across worlds. But I had no idea that what I'd witnessed was just the beginning. Because Scout's true purpose, his real mission as a bridge between worlds, was about to unfold in ways that would transform not just the Reeves family, but my own understanding of what it means to love, to lose, and to be loved in return by souls that transcend the limitations of the physical world. The little boy I'd lost 30 years ago, the brother whose sudden death had shaped my entire life, I was about to discover that love creates bonds so powerful they can reach across the veil between worlds to guide, protect, and heal the hearts left behind. Scout was just the beginning of a revelation that would prove the souls of our beloved companions never truly leave us. They simply transform into something more beautiful, more powerful, more present than we ever dared to imagine. But first, I had to learn to see with eyes that looked beyond the physical world, to hear with ears that could perceive the whispers of love that echo across eternity, and to understand that sometimes the most profound healing comes wrapped in golden fur and delivered through the gentle touch of a paw that carries the warmth of heaven itself. The impossible was about to become undeniably real, and my life would never be the same. And this was only the beginning. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Scout's intelligent amber gaze and heard that whisper, "Some of us are sent back." The rational part of my mind, the part trained in veterinary science, kept trying to explain away what I'd experienced. Auditory hallucinations brought on by stress, overactive imagination triggered by the emotional intensity of working with a grieving family. But deep down, I knew what I'd witnessed transcended any clinical explanation. At 3:17 in the morning, my emergency phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael Reeves's number, Dr. Morrison. His voice was tight with panic. "Something's happening with Scout. He's been barking at Emma's bedroom door for the past hour, but she's sleeping peacefully inside. When I try to move him, he won't budge, and the temperature in the hallway, it's freezing cold." 20 minutes later, I stood in the Reeves house, watching Scout maintain a protective stance outside Emma's bedroom. The little girl was indeed sleeping soundly, but the hallway felt like a walk-in freezer despite the home's heating system running normally. "When did this start?" I asked, kneeling beside Scout. The puppy acknowledged my presence with a brief glance but didn't abandon his post. "About an hour ago," Michael replied, wrapping his robe tighter around himself. "I woke up because the house felt so cold, and I found Scout like this." "Dr. Morrison, I'm starting to think Emma might be right about things I don't understand." That's when we heard it. A soft thudding sound coming from inside Emma's room, rhythmic and deliberate. Michael reached for the door handle, but Scout immediately positioned himself between Michael and the door, a low growl warning him away. "He's protecting her from something." I realized my veterinary instincts recognizing the puppy's behavior as classic guardian positioning. But protecting her from what? The thudding sound grew louder, more insistent. Then, suddenly, Emma's voice called out from inside the room, "Daddy? Mommy says there's a bad man trying to get in through my window." Michael's face went white. Emma's room is on the second floor. We rushed to the living room window that offered a view of the backyard. What we saw made my blood run cold. A dark figure crouched below Emma's bedroom window, working at the screen with some kind of tool. "Call 911, I whispered. But Michael was already dialing. Scout's barking intensified. But now I understood it wasn't random alarm. It was strategic warning, timed perfectly to alert us to the danger while the intruder was still outside. But here's what shattered my understanding of what was possible. As we watched the dark figure below, a second presence appeared in the yard. Translucent, shimmering, but unmistakable, the figure of a woman positioning herself between the intruder and the house. "Linda," Michael breathed, recognizing his deceased wife. The intruder suddenly stopped his work on the window screen, looking around in obvious confusion. He seemed to be reacting to something we could barely see, the spirit of Linda Reeves, protecting her daughter from beyond the grave. Then the most extraordinary thing happened. The intruder stumbled backward, fell, and ran toward the street, as if something had physically pushed him. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but the real protection had come from a love that transcended death itself. Scout finally relaxed his guard position, trotting to the front door to wait for the police. As he passed me, I could have sworn I heard that whisper again. "Now do you understand, Dr. Morrison? Some bonds are too strong for death to break." The police caught the intruder 6 blocks away, a convicted burglar with a history of targeting homes where he'd observed children living alone with single parents. He confessed to watching the Reeves house for weeks, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. "How did you know he was there?" Officer Janet Chen asked as she took our statements. "The responding unit said you called it in before he'd even attempted entry." Michael looked at Scout, who sat calmly beside Emma's chair as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Our dog warned us, but I knew the truth was far more complex. Scout hadn't just detected an intruder. He'd somehow facilitated communication between a deceased mother and her living family, enabling protection that transcended the boundaries between worlds." "Dr. Morrison," Emma said as the police finished their investigation, "Mommy wants me to tell you something." I knelt beside the little girl, my heart racing. "What does she want you to tell me?" "She says you lost someone too, a little boy who looked just like you. She says he's been trying to help you understand that he never really left, but you've been too sad to hear him." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd never told the Reeves family about Danny, never mentioned my brother's death to anyone in town. There was no way Emma could know about my childhood loss. "She says his name is Danny," Emma continued, her young voice carrying a certainty that defied her years. "And he says you became a doctor for animals because you wanted to save everyone you couldn't save him. But he says you can't save anyone from love." Dr. Morrison, love is what saves everyone. Tears I'd held back for 30 years suddenly poured down my face. In that moment, I understood that Scout's presence in the Reeves family wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration by forces beyond our understanding, designed to heal not just their grief, but mine as well. "Emma," I managed to whisper, "is Danny here now?" The little girl nodded, pointing to the space beside my chair. "He's right there. He says he's been waiting so long for you to see him." And suddenly I could. Not clearly, not in the way you'd see a living person, but enough to recognize the face I'd last seen sleeping peacefully in a bed that had become a tomb. Danny, eternally 8 years old, radiating the same love that had made him my best friend in life. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," I whispered to the empty air that somehow didn't feel empty at all. "You don't save love, Rachel." I heard in my mind, Danny's voice as clear as it had been 3 decades ago. "Love saves you. And I've been saving you all this time, guiding you to help other families understand what you needed to learn, that losing someone you love doesn't mean they stop loving you back." Scout moved to my side, pressing his warm body against my legs in the same comforting gesture Michael had described. In that touch, I felt not just the puppy's present affection, but the accumulated love of every soul who'd ever watched over the living from beyond the veil. The next morning, I called my clinic and rescheduled all my appointments. For the first time in my career, I needed to research something that couldn't be found in veterinary textbooks or medical journals. I spent the day documenting everything I'd witnessed, everything I'd heard, everything I'd felt during my encounters with Scout and the Reeves family. The evidence was overwhelming, but it challenged every scientific principle I'd been trained to accept. Animals who demonstrated impossible knowledge, spirits who could interact with the physical world, love that created bridges between life and death. None of it fit into the neat categories of biological science, yet all of it was undeniably real. That afternoon, Scout appeared at my clinic without the Reeves family. He sat in my waiting room as if he belonged there, regarding me with those wise amber eyes that seemed to hold secrets from beyond the stars. "How did you get here?" I asked, checking the parking lot for Michael's truck. No sign of them anywhere. Scout tilted his head toward my office, clearly indicating he wanted to speak with me privately. As we walked down the hall, I noticed my other animal patients reacting to his presence, not with the curiosity or territorial behavior typical when strange animals entered their space, but with a reverence that bordered on worship. In my office, Scout positioned himself in front of my desk and began the most extraordinary demonstration I'd ever witnessed. Using his paw, he began drawing symbols in the scattered papers on my desk, not random scratches, but deliberate markings that looked almost like a primitive form of writing. The symbols seemed to tell a story, images that could be interpreted as souls leaving bodies, bridges forming between worlds, love creating connections that transcended physical existence. And at the center of each grouping, a small figure that looked unmistakably like a dog, serving as a messenger between the living and the dead. "You're not just a puppy, are you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Scout completed his symbolic message and looked directly into my eyes. For a moment his appearance seemed to shift, becoming more translucent, more ethereal, revealing glimpses of the spiritual being inhabiting the physical form of a 6-month-old dog. "We are sent when love calls for healing." His voice spoke directly into my mind. "Some wounds are too deep for time to mend. Some grief too profound for human comfort alone. That's when souls like mine are given permission to return, to serve as bridges between worlds, to help the living understand that death is not the end of love. It's love's transformation into something eternal." But why the Reeves family? Why me? Because Linda Reeves died knowing her daughter would struggle with loss the way you struggled with loss. Her love was so powerful it reached across the veil to request help. And because your grief over Danny has made you the perfect person to validate what others might dismiss as imagination. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. If Scout was a spiritual messenger, if deceased loved ones could request intervention from beyond death, if love created actual bridges between worlds, then everything I thought I knew about life, death, and consciousness was fundamentally incomplete. "Scout," I said, my voice trembling, "are there others like you?" His canine features shifted into what could only be described as a smile. "Dr. Morrison, we are everywhere. Every animal who has ever been loved possesses the potential to return as a messenger. Every pet who has ever comforted a grieving human has created a connection that transcends physical death. The question isn't whether there are others like me. The question is whether humans are ready to understand that the love they share with their animal companions creates bonds so powerful they reshape the very fabric of reality itself." As Scout spoke, my office filled with presences I could sense but not quite see. The spirits of beloved pets who had crossed the rainbow bridge but remained connected to the humans they'd loved in life. The air hummed with an energy that spoke of love so profound it could not be contained by the boundaries between worlds. But this revelation was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about consciousness, about the nature of souls, about the true purpose of the bonds we form with our animal companions. Because Scout's mission wasn't just to heal the Reeves family's grief or help me understand Danny's continued presence, his true purpose was far more extraordinary, far more transformative than I could have imagined. The puppy who seemed perfectly normal was about to show me that the love between humans and animals creates something sacred, something eternal, something that proves consciousness itself is far more mysterious and beautiful than science has ever dared to suggest. And the most profound revelation was yet to come. 2 weeks after Scout's revelation in my office, I received a call that would forever change my understanding of how widespread these spiritual phenomena actually were. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the University of California's Animal Behavior Research Center had somehow learned about my encounters with Scout. Dr. Morrison, her voice was urgent, professional, but tinged with excitement. "I've been tracking unusual reports from veterinary clinics across the country. Cases of animals displaying impossible knowledge, facilitating communication with deceased family members, demonstrating abilities that transcend normal biological parameters. Your name came up in connection with a case involving a puppy named Scout." My hands tightened on the phone. "How did you hear about Scout? Because what you've witnessed isn't isolated, Dr. Morrison. We've documented over 300 similar cases in the past 18 months. Animals who seem to serve as bridges between the living and the dead, facilitating healing that conventional therapy can't provide. Before I could respond, she continued, there's something happening, something accelerating. These messenger animals are appearing more frequently, in more locations, as if something in the spiritual realm is orchestrating a systematic intervention in human grief. That afternoon, Dr. Vasquez arrived at my clinic with files that made my head spin. Photographs of animals displaying impossible behaviors, audio recordings of deceased pet owners' voices speaking through living animals, electromagnetic readings that suggested the presence of consciousness existing independently of biological systems. Dr. Morrison, she said, spreading the evidence across my desk, we believe these animals aren't just random spiritual messengers, they're part of a coordinated network, guided by the collective consciousness of deceased pets, who've transcended individual existence to serve the greater purpose of healing human grief. I want to hear from you right now in the comments. Have you ever had a pet who seemed to know things they shouldn't have been able to know? Have you experienced moments with an animal that felt supernatural, spiritual, beyond normal pet behavior? Share your story below, because what we're discovering suggests these experiences are far more common than anyone realized, and your story could help other people understand they're not alone in witnessing these profound connections. As Dr. Vasquez laid out the research, a pattern emerged that was both beautiful and terrifying in its implications. The messenger animals didn't appear randomly. They were strategically placed with families experiencing specific types of trauma that matched the experiences of deceased pets who had loved similar humans in life. Look at this case from Oregon, Dr. Vasquez said, pulling up a file. The Henderson family lost their daughter in a car accident. 3 months later, they adopted a kitten from a shelter. The kitten immediately began displaying the exact same habits, preferences, and behaviors as the daughter's deceased cat who had died 2 years earlier. But here's what's extraordinary. Genetic testing confirmed the kitten had no biological relationship to the original cat. She showed me another case. The Rodriguez family in Texas. Their son died from leukemia at age 7. 6 months later, they rescued a dog who began leading them to their son's favorite hiding places around the house, places the new dog had never seen before. The dog would sit in those spaces and whimper, as if comforting an invisible child. Each case file revealed the same pattern: grieving families receiving animal companions who possessed impossible knowledge about their deceased loved ones, facilitating healing through connections that transcended the boundaries between life and death. Dr. Morrison, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice dropping to a whisper, we think the love between humans and their pets creates something that science doesn't yet understand, a form of consciousness that survives biological death and retains the ability to influence the physical world through new animal messengers. That's when Scout appeared in my clinic doorway, though neither the Reeves family nor any other human had brought him. He walked directly to Dr. Vasquez and sat down, studying her with those wise amber eyes that seemed to hold secrets from beyond the stars. You're him, Doctor, Vasquez breathed. You're Scout. Scout tilted his head and began creating symbols on the floor with his paw, not the random scratching of a normal dog, but deliberate markings that matched symbols Dr. Vasquez had documented in her research files. He's communicating, she said, her scientific objectivity crumbling as she witnessed the impossible firsthand. Dr. Morrison, this puppy is actively trying to convey information about the network of spiritual messengers. The symbols Scout created seemed to represent a vast web connecting grieving humans with animal messengers, all coordinated by what could only be described as a collective consciousness of deceased pets who had transcended individual existence to serve a higher purpose. But then Scout did something that chilled us both to the bone. He walked to my computer, somehow activated the screen with his paw, and pulled up a map showing dots of light scattered across the globe, each dot representing a location where messenger animals were currently active. This isn't possible, Dr. Vasquez whispered. Animals don't use computers. They don't understand digital interfaces. Scout turned to look at her directly. And when he spoke, His voice resonated in both our minds simultaneously. Vasquez, you've spent your career studying animal consciousness, without understanding that consciousness itself transcends the biological systems you measure. What you're witnessing isn't anomalous animal behavior. It's evidence that love creates bonds so powerful they reshape reality itself. The computer screen continued displaying the global map, showing hundreds of points of light pulsing in coordinated patterns. Each pulse seemed to represent a moment of healing, a grieving human receiving comfort from a messenger animal guided by the spirit of a beloved pet who had crossed the rainbow bridge. But why now? I asked. Why are these interventions accelerating? Because humanity is reaching a critical point in its understanding of consciousness, Scout replied, his puppy form somehow conveying ancient wisdom. For too long, humans have believed that death ends relationships, that love is limited by biological existence. But the bonds you form with your animal companions prove that consciousness transcends every limitation the physical world imposes. Dr. Vasquez pulled out her recording equipment, documenting every word, every impossible demonstration. Scout, are you saying that deceased pets maintain the ability to influence the living world? I'm saying that love creates bridges between dimensions that your science doesn't yet recognize. Every human who has ever truly loved an animal has contributed to a collective consciousness that exists beyond individual death. That consciousness guides new animals to serve as messengers, healers, bridges between worlds. The implications were staggering. If Scout's explanation was accurate, then every pet cemetery, every memorial to a beloved animal, every tear shed over a lost companion, had contributed to a spiritual network dedicated to healing human grief. But our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of someone I'd hoped never to see again. Dr. Marcus Webb, the same skeptical researcher who had tried to debunk similar phenomena in other states, stood in my clinic doorway with two associates carrying sophisticated monitoring equipment. Dr. Morrison, Webb said, his voice cold with professional disdain, we've received reports of fraudulent animal behavior demonstrations at this facility. These so-called spiritual manifestations are dangerous delusions that exploit grieving pet owners. Scout immediately positioned himself between Webb and the research files, his protective stance making it clear that he understood the threat these men represented. Dr. Vasquez said, rising to face the intruders, the evidence is overwhelming. You can't dismiss documented phenomena just because they challenge conventional scientific paradigms. Watch me, Webb replied, signaling his associates to begin setting up their equipment. These electromagnetic field disruptors will neutralize any parlor tricks you're using to create these supposed supernatural manifestations. But as Webb's team activated their equipment, something extraordinary happened. Instead of disrupting Scout's abilities, the electromagnetic fields seemed to amplify them. The puppy's form became more radiant, more obviously connected to spiritual dimensions beyond the physical world, and he wasn't alone. The clinic began filling with translucent figures, spirits of beloved pets who had served as messengers throughout history. Dogs, cats, horses, birds, all radiating the same profound love that had defined their relationships with humans in life. Impossible, Webb whispered, staring at his equipment readings that showed energy signatures defying every known law of physics. Scout walked directly to Webb, sat down, and looked up at the man with infinite compassion. Dr. Webb, your skepticism comes from your own unhealed grief. The Springer Spaniel you lost when you were 10. Rusty. He's been trying to reach you for 40 years. Your entire career debunking animal consciousness has been your way of avoiding the pain of believing he might still love you from beyond death. The spirit of a Springer Spaniel materialized beside Webb, its tail wagging with the enthusiasm of a dog, reunited with its beloved human after decades of separation. Webb's professional facade cracked completely as he stared at the impossible vision of his childhood companion. Rusty died of cancer. I held him while they put him to sleep. He can't be here. Death is final. Love is more final than death. Marcus. Rusty's spirit communicated directly into Webb's mind. I've been with you through every career achievement, every moment of doubt, every night you've dreamed about me and woken up thinking it was just wishful thinking. I never left, Marcus. I just learned to love you from a different dimension. The electromagnetic equipment Webb's team had brought began displaying readings that would revolutionize physics if anyone could make sense of them. Energy signatures that suggested consciousness could exist independently of biological systems. Quantum entanglement patterns that indicated love created measurable connections between living and deceased beings. But the most profound moment came when Webb fell to his knees, reaching toward the spirit of his beloved Rusty with hands that trembled with 40 years of suppressed grief. "I'm sorry I forgot you," he whispered. "I'm sorry I convinced myself that love ended with death." "You didn't forget me, Marcus," Rusty replied with infinite patience. "You became a scientist because losing me made you want to understand consciousness, life, death. Your skepticism wasn't wrong. It was preparation for this moment, when you'd have the credibility to validate what others might dismiss as wishful thinking." As the spirits began to fade, Scout approached me one final time. His mission with the Reeves family was complete. Emma was speaking normally again. Michael was dating a kind woman who understood his grief. And both father and daughter had learned that love transcends death. "Morrison," Scout said, his form beginning to shimmer with ethereal light, "your real work is just beginning. Danny has been guiding you toward this moment your entire career. The animals you've saved, the families you've comforted, the grief you've healed, all of it was preparation for becoming a bridge between the scientific community and the spiritual reality they need to understand." "Are you leaving?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm transforming," Scout replied. "My physical mission is complete, but my spiritual presence will remain connected to everyone I've helped heal. That's how the network operates. Each successful intervention creates a new node of understanding, a new bridge between worlds." As Scout's physical form dissolved into pure light, I felt the presence of Danny stronger than ever before, his 80-year-old voice clear in my mind. "Rachel, you spent 30 years thinking you failed to save me. But you didn't need to save me, you needed to learn that love saves everyone. Now help others understand what you've discovered." Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Webb stood beside me, forever changed by witnessing the impossible truth about consciousness, love, and the eternal bonds between humans and their animal companions. We had documented proof that the relationships we form with our pets create connections that transcend death itself. Evidence that love generates a form of consciousness that exists beyond biological limitations. Validation that the souls of beloved animals remain connected to the humans they've loved, serving as messengers, healers, and bridges between worlds. But our discovery would challenge everything humanity believed about life, death, and the nature of consciousness itself. The final revelation would transform everything we thought we knew about the eternal power of love. 6 months after Scout's departure, I found myself standing before the International Conference on Consciousness and Animal-Human Bonds in Geneva, my hands steady as I prepared to present findings that would forever change how humanity understood the connection between love and consciousness itself. The auditorium was filled with scientists, veterinarians, theologians, and grieving pet owners from around the world. In the front row sat Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Webb, whose transformation from skeptic to advocate had given our research unprecedented credibility in the scientific community. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "what we've discovered challenges every assumption we've made about the nature of consciousness, the reality of love, and the connections that define what it means to truly bond with another being." The presentation began with Scout's story, the impossible awareness, the spiritual communications, the moment when a simple puppy adoption revealed a network of consciousness that transcended death itself. But then I showed them something that made the entire audience fall silent. Live video feeds from animal shelters around the world, all synchronized to demonstrate the same phenomenon occurring simultaneously. Animals displaying impossible knowledge about potential adopters, gravitating toward families who had recently lost pets, demonstrating behaviors that suggested they possessed memories and awareness from deceased animals who had loved similar humans. "This isn't coincidence," I explained. advancing to a slide showing global data. We've now documented over 12,000 verified instances of messenger animals, facilitating healing between grieving humans and the spirits of their deceased pets. The phenomenon is accelerating exponentially, suggesting we're witnessing the emergence of a new form of consciousness that operates through love itself. Dr. Webb stood to address the assembly, his voice carrying the authority of his former skepticism transformed into profound understanding. Colleagues, I spent 20 years trying to debunk these phenomena because I was afraid of what they meant. But the evidence is irrefutable. Love creates measurable quantum connections that persist beyond biological death. The crowd stirred with excitement and disbelief in equal measure. But then I revealed the breakthrough that would change everything. We've discovered that the bonds formed between humans and their animal companions generate what we're calling consciousness entanglement. I continued, pulling up complex quantum equations on the screen. When love reaches sufficient depth and duration, it creates permanent connections between souls that exist independently of biological systems. Dr. Sarah Chen, a quantum physicist from Princeton, raised her hand. Dr. Morrison, are you suggesting that emotional connections create actual quantum bridges between consciousness? I'm not suggesting it, I replied. We're measuring it. The same quantum entanglement principles that govern particle physics apply to consciousness when bonded by love. Death doesn't end these connections. It transforms them into something that operates beyond space-time limitations. But the most profound moment came when I shared the discovery that had driven my entire journey into this impossible research. When I was 12 years old, I lost my brother Danny to sudden cardiac death. The trauma shaped my entire life, drove me to become a veterinarian, convinced me that love always ended in loss. But what I've learned through this research is that my brother's death wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a connection that guided every choice I made, every animal I saved, every moment of healing I provided. As if summoned by my words, the auditorium grew warm with a presence that transcended physical reality. The air shimmered with energy that spoke of love, so profound it could reshape the very fabric of existence. And there he was, Danny, no longer the 8-year-old I'd lost 30 years ago, but a being of pure consciousness radiating the love that had defined our bond in life. Rachel? His voice resonated throughout the auditorium, heard by everyone present. You thought losing me was the worst thing that could happen. But it was actually the most important thing that could happen, because it taught you that love is stronger than death, more permanent than physical existence, more powerful than any force in the universe. The manifestation was so clear, so undeniably real, that gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. Scientists reached for their instruments, theologians fell to their knees, and pet owners who had attended hoping for comfort found themselves witnessing proof that their deepest hopes about eternal love were absolutely true. Danny's spirit moved through the auditorium, stopping beside individuals who had lost beloved pets. With each person he touched, their deceased animal companions materialized, dogs, cats, birds, horses, all radiating the same profound love that had characterized their relationships in life. This is what Scout wanted you to understand, Danny continued, his presence filling the massive auditorium with warmth and light. Every animal who has ever loved a human contributes to a collective consciousness that exists beyond individual death. That consciousness guides new animals to serve as messengers, healers, bridges between worlds. But then something even more extraordinary happened. The spirits of the beloved pets began communicating directly with their former humans, sharing messages of love, forgiveness, and eternal connection that brought healing to wounds some had carried for decades. A woman in the third row sobbed as the spirit of her golden retriever, lost to cancer 2 years earlier, nuzzled her hand with ethereal warmth. An elderly man wept as his childhood cat, gone for 40 years, curled up in his lap with purrs that seemed to emanate from heaven itself. You see, Danny said, his 8-year-old wisdom somehow encompassing truths that transformed everyone present. Death isn't the opposite of love. It's love's graduation into something eternal. Every tear you've shed for a lost pet, every moment you've missed them, every time you've felt their presence when no one else could see them, you've been participating in the most profound truth about consciousness, that love creates bonds so powerful they redefine reality itself. Dr. Elena Martinez, a skeptical researcher from Harvard, stood with tears streaming down her face. But how is this possible? How can consciousness survive without biological systems? Because consciousness isn't produced by biology, Danny replied gently. Biology is the instrument consciousness uses to express love in the physical world, but love itself transcends every limitation, including death. When a human and an animal form a bond deep enough, they create something that exists beyond individual existence, a shared consciousness that operates through the quantum field of love itself. The implications crashed over the assembled scientists, theologians, and pet owners, like a revelation too profound for immediate comprehension. If love created consciousness that survived death, if the bonds between humans and animals generated eternal connections, then everything about how we understood relationships, grief, and the nature of existence needed to be reconsidered. Danny, I asked, my voice shaking with 30 years of suppressed emotion, why didn't you show me this sooner? Why did I have to wait so long to understand? My brother's spirit approached me with infinite patience and love, because you needed to become the person capable of validating this truth for others. Your grief over losing me made you a healer. Your career as a veterinarian gave you credibility. Your encounter with Scout prepared you to serve as a bridge between the scientific community and the spiritual reality they needed to understand. As the spirits began to fade, each one left behind something precious, absolute certainty that love transcends death, that consciousness survives biological cessation, that the bonds we form with our animal companions are eternal connections that reshape reality itself. The conference concluded with something unprecedented in scientific history. A moment of silent recognition that we had witnessed proof of consciousness operating beyond every limitation we thought was absolute. Webb approached me afterward, his face transformed by the peace of someone who had finally understood that love was stronger than loss. Dr. Morrison Rusty visited me again last night. For the first time in 40 years, I felt complete. Thank you for helping me remember that some bonds are too strong for death to break. Dr. Vasquez joined us, her research files now containing documentation that would revolutionize multiple scientific disciplines. The data we've collected will take decades to fully analyze, but one thing is absolutely certain: love creates consciousness that operates independent of biological systems. As I stood in the empty auditorium, surrounded by the lingering warmth of all the spirits who had manifested to prove the eternal nature of love, I understood that my life's work was complete. Not because the research was finished, but because the truth had been revealed in a way that could never again be denied or suppressed. Scout's mission had succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined. The puppy, who seemed perfectly normal, had opened a door between worlds that would never again be closed. Children around the world would grow up knowing that their beloved pets lived forever in a realm of pure love. Grieving pet owners would find comfort in the certain knowledge that their bonds with their animal companions were eternal. And humanity would finally understand that consciousness itself was far more mysterious, far more beautiful, far more eternal than we had ever dared to believe. The transformation was complete, but the real journey was just beginning. The final revelation would change everything forever. 1 year after the Geneva conference, I stood in the lobby of the newly established Global Institute for Consciousness Studies, a research facility funded by donations from pet owners around the world who had witnessed their own miraculous reunions with beloved animals. The building hummed with activity as scientists, veterinarians, and spiritual advisors worked together to document and understand the phenomenon we now called love-based consciousness transfer. Emma Reeves, now 10 years old and speaking with the confidence of a child who had learned that love transcends death, served as our youngest research consultant. Her ability to communicate with spirits had developed into something extraordinary. She could facilitate connections between grieving families and their deceased pets with a success rate that astounded our most skeptical researchers. Dr. Morrison, Emma said, approaching me with Scout's successor, a gentle Labrador mix named Hope, who had appeared at the animal shelter the day after Scout's transformation into pure spirit. Hope says there's something important happening today, something that will help everyone understand why the messenger animals keep coming. Michael Reeves, now married to Dr. Patricia Jennings, a grief counselor who specialized in pet loss, had become one of our most effective advocates. His transformation from skeptical single father to passionate believer had given hope to countless families struggling with similar losses. The Santos family is here for their consultation, Michael reported, gesturing toward a mother and teenage daughter who sat in our waiting area with the careful composure of people afraid to hope too much. They lost their border collie Max 6 months ago. The daughter hasn't spoken since the accident. I nodded, understanding the pattern. Selective mutism following traumatic pet loss had become one of our most common cases, and also one of our most successfully treated. The messenger animals seemed particularly drawn to children whose grief had temporarily severed their connection to the speaking world. Emma? Would you and Hope like to meet them first? What happened next had become routine, yet it never failed to move everyone who witnessed it. Emma approached the Santos family with the quiet confidence of a child who understood that healing was her calling. Hope positioned herself beside the silent teenager, Maria, and immediately began demonstrating behaviors that made the girl's eyes widen with recognition. The Labrador mix tilted her head at the exact angle that Max used to use when listening to Maria's secrets. She positioned herself at Maria's left side, the same spot where Max had always walked. Most remarkably, she began leading Maria toward our therapy garden, following a path that had no significance to anyone except someone who had walked it countless times with a border collie who loved to chase butterflies. "Mijo," Maria whispered. The first word she'd spoken in 6 months, the same endearment she'd used for Max. Santos burst into tears as her daughter finally spoke, but her relief transformed into amazement as Hope led Maria to a specific bench in the garden where they sat together in the afternoon sunlight. "He's here, Mama," Maria said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Max is here." Hope brought him with her. Through the therapy room's windows, we watched as Maria began speaking to empty air beside the bench. But to those of us who had learned to see beyond the physical world, the space wasn't empty at all. The spirit of Max materialized gradually, his border collie intelligence and boundless love radiating through the dimensional veil that had grown so thin in our garden. "Dr. Morrison," Dr. Webb said, joining me at the window, "we're documenting 12 successful communications today alone. The phenomenon is accelerating beyond anything we could have predicted." His transformation continued to amaze me. The man who had once dedicated his career to debunking animal consciousness now served as our head researcher, his scientific rigor ensuring that our findings would withstand the most skeptical scrutiny. "Webb, show me the latest global data." He led me to the monitoring room, where screens displayed real-time information from research centers on 6 continents. The data was staggering, over 100,000 documented cases of messenger animals facilitating healing between grieving humans and their deceased pets. The phenomenon had become so widespread that major universities were establishing departments of consciousness studies specifically to investigate what we'd discovered. "But here's what's truly extraordinary," Dr. Webb said, pulling up a world map dotted with pulsing lights. "The interventions aren't random anymore. There's a pattern, an intelligence coordinating these placements. Messenger animals are appearing exactly where and when they're needed most, as if the collective consciousness of deceased pets has evolved into something that can predict and respond to human grief on a global scale." The implications were staggering. We weren't just witnessing individual instances of love transcending death, we were documenting evidence of a spiritual network that operated with the efficiency of a global early warning system for human suffering. "Dr. Morrison," Emma's voice called from the garden, "you need to come outside. Something amazing is happening." In our therapy garden, I found Maria Santos surrounded by what could only be described as a gathering of spirits, not just Max, but multiple dogs, cats, and other beloved pets who had belonged to different families throughout history. They had manifested in response to Maria's breakthrough, creating a visible celebration of healing that left every observer speechless. But this wasn't just about Maria's healing. As word spread through the facility, other families who had recently experienced successful communications with their deceased pets began arriving in the garden. Within an hour, we had dozens of people standing in the presence of their beloved animal companions who had crossed the Rainbow Bridge but returned to prove that love never dies. "This is what Scout wanted us to understand," I said to the assembled families, my voice carrying across the garden where the living and the dead stood together in perfect harmony. "The love between humans and animals creates something so powerful it transforms the very nature of reality. Every pet who has ever loved a human contributes to a collective consciousness that exists beyond individual death, dedicated to ensuring that no one grieves alone." An elderly man named Harold Chen stepped forward, tears streaming down his weathered face, as the spirit of his golden retriever Buddy, lost 20 years ago, materialized beside him. "Doctor, I stopped believing in anything after Buddy died. I thought love was just chemistry, that death ended everything. But this proves that love is the most real thing in the universe." That's when Danny appeared one final time, his 8-year-old spirit radiating the accumulated wisdom of 3 decades spent loving me from beyond the veil. "Rachel," he said, his presence filling the garden with warmth that transcended physical sensation, "your work here is complete. Not because there's nothing left to discover, but because humanity now understands the truth that love creates consciousness that survives every limitation." "What happens now?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Now you help the world understand that every relationship based on genuine love, whether between humans and animals, parents and children, friends and companions, creates eternal connections that death cannot break. The messenger animals were just the beginning. Love itself is the bridge between worlds." As Danny's spirit began to fade, I felt his presence settle into my heart in a way that was both familiar and completely new. Not as a separate being I could communicate with, but as an integral part of my own consciousness, forever connected through bonds that transcended every boundary I'd once thought was absolute. "Dr. Morrison," Emma said, approaching with hope at her side, "Scout left me a message. He says the real work is just beginning. He says humans are ready to understand that consciousness and love are the same thing, and that every being capable of love possesses a soul that lives forever." The garden fell silent as the assembled families absorbed the magnitude of what they'd witnessed. Children who had struggled with the loss of beloved pets now understood that death was not an ending but a transformation. Adults who had carried grief for decades found healing in the certain knowledge that their animal companions remained connected to them through bonds that would last for eternity. Dr. Vasquez approached with the final piece of documentation we needed to transform human understanding forever. "Dr. Morrison, we've just received confirmation from quantum physicists at CERN. The consciousness entanglement we've been measuring operates through the same quantum field that governs the fundamental forces of the universe. Love isn't just an emotion, it's a fundamental force of nature, as real and measurable as gravity or electromagnetism." The scientific validation of what we'd experienced spiritually completed the circle of understanding. Love created consciousness that operated beyond biological systems. The bonds between humans and animals generated eternal connections that survived death itself. And the collective consciousness of deceased pets had evolved into a network dedicated to healing human grief and proving that love truly was stronger than death. As the sun set over our therapy garden, families departed carrying with them absolute certainty that their beloved animal companions lived on in a realm of pure love, forever connected through bonds that death could never break. The Institute would continue its research, documenting and protecting the phenomena we'd discovered. Children around the world would grow up knowing that the pets they loved would love them forever. Grieving families would find comfort in the proven reality that consciousness survived death through the power of love itself. And somewhere in the quantum field that connects all consciousness, Scout continued his mission as a messenger between worlds, guiding new animals to serve as bridges for families who needed to understand that the love they shared with their pets was eternal, transcendent, and more powerful than any force in the universe. The puppy who had seemed perfectly normal had revealed the most profound truth about existence. that love creates consciousness that lives forever, that the bonds between humans and animals are sacred connections that reshape reality itself, and that death is not the end of our relationships with our beloved companions. It's love's transformation into something eternal. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your soul, if it changed how you understand the eternal bond you share with your four-legged companion, then you know why we're here. Subscribe to Echoes of Dog, where we share stories that prove the spiritual connection between humans and dogs runs deeper than death itself. The love you feel for your pet isn't just beautiful, it's eternal, it's conscious, and it's more powerful than anything in the universe. Every dog has a soul that lives forever, and that soul remains connected to you through bonds that death cannot break. Your love creates bridges between worlds, and those bridges last forever.